The champagne bottle I'd been saving for 3 years shattered against the restaurant floor as Brittany Johnson, the woman I was about to propose to, locked lips with my own business partner in front of 50 stunned guests. The diamond ring, worth my entire savings account, suddenly felt like a lead weight in my trembling hand as she whispered yes to his proposal, the proposal he'd apparently planned to hijack mine with all along. But what happened next changed everything. While I stood there like a broken man, humiliated and betrayed, her best friend Nicole White grabbed my arm and whispered for words that would flip my world upside down. Within an hour, I went from the most embarrassed man in the room to someone who would make Brittany regret the day she was born. Because sometimes, the person who saves you from your worst moment becomes the reason your enemies fear you most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 6 months earlier, I thought I had it all figured out. Desmond Wright, 30 years old, successful consulting business. Ain't what I believed was the perfect relationship with Brittany Johnson. We'd been together for 3 years, and every morning, I woke up in my Oakwood Heights penthouse, thinking about how lucky I was. The city of Millbrook stretched out below my floor-to-ceiling windows like a kingdom I was about to inherit, and Brittany would be my queen. Morning, handsome, Brittany would purr as she brought me coffee in bed, her auburn hair catching the morning light just right. She had this way of making even the most mundane Tuesday feel like the beginning of something extraordinary. Andrew called again about the Henderson project. Sounds stressed. Andrew Jackson, my business partner at Wright & Jackson Consulting, my fraternity brother from college, and the man I trusted more than my own reflection. We'd built our firm from nothing, working 18-hour days in a cramped office above a dry cleaner, until we could afford our current glass tower in downtown Millbrook. Andrew was the numbers guy, I was the client relations specialist. And together we'd created something that made us both wealthy beyond our college dreams. Andrew's always stressed. I'd laugh, pulling Brittany closer. That's why we make such a good team. He worries about everything so I don't have to. What I didn't know was that Andrew had been worrying about much more than quarterly reports. While I was planning surprise weekend getaways for Brittany, he was planning something much more elaborate. While I was shopping for engagement rings at Morrison's Jewelers, I was carefully selecting a 2-carat solitaire that would complement Brittany's delicate fingers. Andrew was shopping for ways to steal my entire life. The signs were there, if I'd been paying attention. Brittany started working late more often, claiming her marketing job at Prestige Communications required extra hours for a big campaign. She'd come home smelling faintly of expensive cologne, not the kind I wore, but something sharper, more aggressive. When I'd suggest dinner at our favorite spot, the Garden Terrace, she'd suddenly remember prior commitments. "Rain check, baby," she'd say, already reaching for her purse. "Nicole's having relationship drama again. You know how she gets." Nicole White, Brittany's best friend since high school, a successful real estate agent with platinum blonde hair, in the kind of sharp business sense that intimidated most men. I'd always liked Nicole. She was direct, funny, and seemed genuinely happy for Brittany and me. She'd often join us for double dates with whatever guy she was seeing that month, and she had this way of making everyone laugh until their sides. Her "you two are disgusting," Nicole would tease whenever Brittany and I got too affectionate at dinner. "Get a room. Or better yet, get married already so I can stop pretending to be happy about your perfect relationship." Little did I know that Nicole's jokes about our perfect relationship would turn out to be more prophetic than comedic. The proposal planning consumed my thoughts for weeks. I wanted everything to be flawless, not just for Brittany, but because I knew our entire social circle would be watching. Our friends from college, my business associates, Brittany's coworkers. Even Andrew and his rotating cast of dates would all be there to witness what I assumed would be the happiest moment of our lives. I chose the Platinum Rose, Millbrook's most exclusive restaurant, with its crystal chandeliers and panoramic view of the city skyline. I reserved the private dining room for 50 guests, hired a string quartet, and even arranged for the chef to create a custom menu featuring all of Brittany's favorite dishes. The champagne was vintage Dom Perignon, the flowers were white roses, flown in from Ecuador, and the ring was a masterpiece that had taken 3 months to custom design. "You're really going all out," Andrew observed one afternoon as I showed him the detailed timeline I'd created for the evening. We were in our office conference room, surrounded by architectural plans for our latest project. But my focus was entirely on the leather portfolio containing my proposal plans. "She deserves the best," I replied, adjusting my tie nervously. "Hey, both know how long I've been thinking about this. 3 years of dating, and I finally found the courage to take the next step." Andrew's smile seemed genuine at the time. "She's going to love it, man. How could she not? You've thought of everything." "What?" I hadn't thought of was the possibility that my best friend and business partner had been thinking about Brittany too. What I hadn't considered was that those late nights at the office, when Andrew claimed to be reviewing contracts and I was home planning our future, he was actually planning how to steal that future for himself. The morning of the proposal arrived. With perfect weather, crisp October air, and a sunset that painted the Millbrook skyline in shades of gold and crimson, I spent the day at the spa, getting a massage and a haircut, wanting to look my absolute best. I picked up the ring from Morrison's one final time, just to make sure the inscription was perfect. "Forever starts tonight, DW." As I stood in my bedroom that evening, adjusting my custom-tailored suit and checking my appearance in the mirror, I felt like the luckiest man alive. In just a few hours, I would ask the woman I loved to marry me, surrounded by everyone who mattered to us. Our future would officially begin, and Andrew would be my best man at the wedding, just like we'd always planned. The irony of that last thought would haunt me for months afterward. The platinum rose looked like something out of a fairy tale. That evening, 50 of our closest friends and family members filled the private dining room, their laughter mixing with the gentle strings of the quartet I'd hired. Crystal glasses caught the candlelight like tiny stars, and the white roses created an ethereal atmosphere that seemed perfect for the most important question of my life. I stood at the head of the table, the ring box burning a hole in my jacket pocket, watching Brittany mingle with our guests. She looked absolutely radiant in a midnight blue dress that hugged her curves perfectly. Her auburn hair swept up in an elegant updo that showcased the diamond earrings I'd given her for her birthday. Every few minutes, she'd catch my eye and smile, that secret smile that made my heart race. "You ready for this, brother?" Andrew appeared beside me, adjusting his charcoal gray suit. He looked unusually nervous, fidgeting with his cufflinks and running his hand through his dark hair more often than usual. "As ready as a man can be," I replied, pulling out my phone to check the timeline one more time. "The main course should be finishing up in about 10 minutes. Then I'll make the toast and ... I paused, noticing Andrew's expression. There was something in his eyes I'd never seen before, a mixture of guilt and determination that made my stomach clench with unexpected anxiety. "Day, before you do anything, I need to tell you something important." Andrew's voice carried a weight that cut through the surrounding chatter like a knife. "Can it wait?" Kind of in the middle of the biggest moment of my life here," I gestured, toward the room full of expectant faces, all of whom knew why they'd been invited to this elaborate dinner. "No, it can't wait." Andrew grabbed my arm with surprising force. "Actually, it's about the biggest moment of your life that I need to talk." Before I could respond, the sound of silverware against crystal filled the room. But it wasn't me making the toast. It was Andrew, standing up and commanding everyone's attention with the confidence that had made him such a successful businessman. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please." Andrew's voice boomed across the dining room. The conversations died instantly, 50 pairs of eyes turning toward us with anticipation. I felt confusion wash over me like ice water as I realized this wasn't part of the plan we'd discussed. "Andrew, what are you doing?" whispered urgently, but he was already moving away from me, walking toward where Brittany sat at the center of the long table. "Tonight is indeed a very special night," Andrew continued, his voice steady and commanding. "A night when someone in this room is going to change their life forever." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, a ring box that looked remarkably similar to the one in my own pocket. The room seemed to tilt sideways as I watched my business partner, best friend, my brother and everything. But blood dropped to one knee in front of my girlfriend at my proposal party. proposal party. Brittany Johnson. Andrew's voice carried across the silent room like a gunshot. I can't pretend anymore. I can't watch you plan a future with someone else when I know, in my heart, that you belong with me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The collective gasp from our guests was nothing compared to the sound of my own world imploding. I stood frozen, my hand instinctively reaching for my own ring box as I watched the woman I loved stare down at my best friend with an expression that was anything but surprised. Andrew, ... Brittany's voice was soft, but it carried perfectly. In the stunned silence, and then I saw it, the look in her eyes. It wasn't shock or confusion or outrage. It was relief, it was joy. It was the look of a woman who had been waiting for this exact moment. I love you, Brittany. I've loved you since the first day brought you to our office 3 years ago. Will you marry me? The ring he held up caught the candlelight, and I could see even from across the room that it was magnificent. Larger than mine. It's more elaborate, probably worth twice what I'd spent. How long had he been planning this? How long had they been planning this together? Yes, Brittany whispered, and then louder. Yes, of course, yes. The room erupted in confused applause as Andrew slipped the ring onto Brittany's finger. The finger where I'd imagined my ring would go. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him with a passion that answered every question I'd been too blind to ask over the past few months. The vintage champagne bottle slipped from my numb fingers and exploded against the marble floor, the sound cutting through the celebration like a thunderclap. 50 heads turned toward me, and in that moment, I became the most pitied man in Millbrook. Desmond ... Heard someone say my name, but it sounded like it was coming from underwater. The room began to spin as the full scope of the betrayal hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a spontaneous moment of passion. This was calculated, planned, orchestrated. The late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the canceled dates, it had all been leading to this moment. They'd been having an affair, planning their future together while I was planning what I thought was, oh, you are future. My legs felt like they were made of concrete as I watched Andrew help Brittany to her feet. Watched him spin her around while our friends, cheered and clapped. Some of them looked confused, glancing between me and the happy couple with uncertainty. Others seemed to understand exactly what was happening, their expressions a mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment that made me want to disappear into the floor. Congratulations, I heard myself say, though I don't remember making the decision to speak. My voice sounded hollow, mechanical, like it was coming from someone else entirely. Brittany finally looked at me then, her face flushed with happiness and guilt. Desmond, I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. This just ... it just happened. Just happened? The words came out as a croak. How long does it matter? Andrew stepped forward, his arm protective around Brittany's waist. The heart wants what it wants, brother. You of all people should understand that, brother. The word hit me like a slap. This man who I'd trusted with my business, my secrets, my future, stolen the woman I loved, and then had the audacity to call me brother while doing it. I stood there in my custom suit, in the restaurant I'd chosen, surrounded by the people I'd invited to witness my happiness, holding a ring that was now worthless. The string quartet continued to play soft classical music as if nothing had changed, as if my entire world hadn't just collapsed in front of 50 witnesses. That's when I felt a gentle hand on my arm and heard a voice that would change everything. You look like you could use some air. Nicole White stood beside me in a stunning emerald green dress that complemented her platinum blonde hair perfectly. Ow. But what struck me most wasn't her appearance. It was the look in her steel blue eyes. While everyone else in the room was either celebrating the happy couple or staring at me with pity, Nicole looked absolutely furious. Come on, she said quietly, her grip on my arm firm but gentle. Let's get you out of here before you do something you'll regret. Or before I do something I definitely won't regret. I allowed her to guide me through the crowd of confused guests, past the string quartet that had awkwardly stopped playing, and through the restaurant's main dining area where other patrons were craning their necks to see what the commotion was about. The cool October air hit my face like a welcome slap as we stepped onto the restaurant's rooftop terrace. "Breathe," Nicole commanded, positioning herself between me and the floor-to-ceiling windows that gave us a perfect view of the ongoing celebration inside. "Just breathe, Desmond." I tried to follow her instruction, but every breath felt like swallowing glass. "How long did you know?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "About what?" "That your best friend is a backstabbing snake and my best friend is a selfish idiot." Nicole's voice carried a venom I'd never heard from her before. "I've suspected something for about 2 months. I knew for certain about a week ago." A week? The betrayal somehow felt even deeper, knowing that someone had known and hadn't warned me. "Why didn't you tell me?" Nicole turned to face me fully, and I saw something in her expression that surprised me, guilt mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify. "Because I tried to talk her out of it, and when that didn't work, I tried to convince her to at least break up with you properly instead of ... this." She gestured toward the windows where we could see Andrew and Brittany still basking in congratulations. "You tried to stop it?" "I told her she was making the biggest mistake of her life," Nicole said fiercely. "I told her that you were worth 10 of Andrew Jackson, that you loved her more than she deserved, and that she was throwing away something real for someone who would probably cheat on her within a year." She laughed bitterly. "But Brittany has always been attracted to shiny objects. Andrew promised her a bigger ring, a bigger wedding, a bigger life. Your love wasn't flashy enough for her." The words should have stung, but coming from Nicole, they felt oddly comforting. At least someone had fought for me, even if they'd lost. "I can't go back in there," I said, staring down at the bustling streets of downtown Millbrook 20 stories. "Below, I can't face them. I can't face anyone." "You don't have to." Nicole pulled out her phone and made a quick call. "James." "It's Nicole. I need you to bring the car around to the Platinum Rose. We're leaving now." She hung up and turned back to me. "My driver will be here in 2 minutes. You're coming with me?" "Nicole, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I just want to go home and what? Sit in your penthouse feeling sorry for yourself while those two celebrate their engagement at your expense." Nicole stepped closer and I caught a whiff of her perfume, something sophisticated and expensive that was nothing like the sweet florals Brittany favored. "No, absolutely not. Tonight, you're going to remember what it feels like to be valued." Before I could protest, a black Mercedes pulled up to the curb below. Nicole grabbed my hand and led me toward the elevator, her confidence somehow managing to cut through my paralysis. "Where are we going?" I asked, as we descended toward the street level. "Somewhere those two will never think to look for you," Nicole replied with a mysterious smile. "Somewhere you can think clearly without the ghost of your former life haunting every corner." The Mercedes was immaculate, with soft leather seats and a partition between us and the driver. As we pulled away from the Platinum Rose, I caught a glimpse of the restaurant's warm glow in the rearview mirror and felt something like relief wash over me. Double quotes. "Nicole, why are you doing this?" I asked as we navigated through the Friday night traffic of downtown Millbrook. We barely know each other outside of double dates and group hangouts. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights streaming past our window. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" I nodded, though she wasn't looking at me. "I've had a crush on you since the first time Brittany brought you to girls' night about 2 years ago," she said quietly. "Not just because you're handsome, though you definitely are, but because of the way you treated the waitress who spilled wine on your shirt. You laughed it off, tipped her extra, and spent the rest of the night making sure she didn't feel bad about it." I vaguely remembered the incident, though it had seemed insignificant at the time. "Brittany was in the bathroom, and I watched you handle that situation with such grace and kindness that I actually felt jealous of my best friend for the first time in my life," Nicole continued. "Then I got to know you better through all our group activities, and I realized that wasn't just an act. You're genuinely a good man, Desmond. You deserve someone who sees that, who values that, and you think that someone is you." The question came out more harshly than I intended. My emotional defense is still fully activated. Nicole turned to look at me then, her blue eyes meeting mine directly. "I think that someone definitely isn't Brittany Johnson. On that we'll have to see. The Mercedes turned onto a tree-lined street in the exclusive Westbridge district, where mansions sat behind iron gates like sleeping giants. We pulled through a security checkpoint and up a winding driveway toward a house that could only be described as palatial. "Welcome to my home," Nicole said as the car stopped in front of a modern masterpiece of glass and stone. Population: one very lonely real estate mogul who just lost her best friend but gained something much more valuable. "What's that?" I asked, genuinely curious. Nicole smiled, and for the first time that evening, it reached her eyes. "The chance to show you what real loyalty looks like." Nicole's mansion was everything my penthouse wasn't warm. Lived in, filled with personal touches that spoke of a life fully embraced rather than merely curated. Original artwork lined the walls, not the sterile contemporary pieces my interior designer had chosen, but paintings that clearly meant something to their owner. Family photos sat on antique side tables, and books were scattered throughout the living room like evidence of actual reading rather than decoration. "Can I get you something to drink?" Nicole asked, kicking off her heels and immediately becoming more relaxed. "I have everything from vintage whiskey to chamomile tea, depending on what kind of numbness you're seeking." "Whiskey," I said without hesitation. "Stronger the better." She disappeared into what I assumed was the kitchen while I wandered around her living room trying to process what had just happened. I'd lost my girlfriend, my best friend, my business partner, and quite possibly my entire social circle. The ring box in my jacket pocket felt like it weighed 50 pounds. Here Nicole reappeared with 2 crystal tumblers filled with amber liquid. "This is a 25-year-old Macallan. It's not going to solve your problems, but it might make them hurt less." I took a generous sip and felt the burn travel down my throat. "How did you afford all this?" I gestured around the opulent room. "I mean, I know real estate is profitable, but this is ... generational wealth," Nicole said simply, settling onto the leather sofa and patting the cushion beside her. "My grandfather built half of downtown Millbrook in the 1960s. My father expanded into commercial development. I chose residential real estate because I like helping people find homes, not because I need the money." I sat down beside her, maintaining what I thought was a respectful distance, but she immediately shifted closer. "So you're saying you're rich?" "Embarrassingly so," she admitted with a laugh. "Which is why I was so impressed that you never once asked me about money or tried to show off when we hung out. Do you know how rare that is for a woman in my position? I was dating your best friend. It would have been inappropriate. And that's exactly what I mean." Nicole tucked her legs underneath her, and I noticed she had small, elegant feet with perfectly painted coral nails. "You have this moral compass that just ... exists. It's not performative or calculated. It's just who you are." I took a sip of whiskey, feeling the alcohol begin to soften the sharp edges of my humiliation. Apparently that moral compass didn't help me see that my girlfriend was cheating on me with my best friend. That's not a failing of your character, Desmond. That's you being a trusting person in a world that doesn't always deserve trust. Nicole's voice was gentle, but firm.
I mean,
You loved Brittany completely, so you assume she loved you the same way. That's not naivety, that's how love is supposed to work. Something in her tone made me look at her more carefully. In the soft lighting of her living room, Nicole looked different than she had at all our group gatherings. Less guarded, more open. The sharp business persona she usually wore had melted away, revealing someone softer underneath. "Can I ask you something?" said, turning to face her fully. "When you said you'd had feelings for me for 2 years, were you serious?" Nicole set down her whiskey and met my gaze directly, dead serious. "Do you want to know the exact moment I knew?" I nodded, surprising myself with how much I wanted to hear this. "It was at your 4th of July party last year. You and Andrew were grilling, and Brittany was inside taking a work call that couldn't wait even though it was a holiday. I was sitting by your pool, watching you flip burgers and make sure everyone had drinks, and this little girl from your neighbor's family started crying because she'd dropped her ice cream. I vaguely remembered the incident, but I let her continue. Noticed immediately, even though you were in the middle of cooking for 30 people, you walked over, knelt down to her level, and asked if she wanted to help you make the best s'more in the history of s'mores. You spent the next 20 minutes with this random kid, teaching her how to roast marshmallows and completely ignoring the fact that half your burgers were probably burning. I did remember that now. Emma, I think her name was. She couldn't have been more than 6, Brittany came back outside just as you were handing Emma this elaborate s'more creation, and instead of thinking it was sweet, she looked annoyed. She actually rolled her eyes and said something about how you were always getting distracted by other people's problems. Nicole shook her head. That's when I knew she didn't deserve you. That's when you developed feelings for me, because I made a s'more. Because you saw someone who needed kindness and you gave it without thinking about what you'd get in return, Nicole corrected. Because you have this capacity for caring that extends beyond your immediate circle. Because you're the kind of man who would spend his entire evening making sure everyone else is happy, even at his own expense. The whiskey, combined with the emotional exhaustion of the evening, was making me feel dangerously vulnerable. Nicole, I need you to know that I'm probably going to be a mess for a while. What happened tonight? It's going to take time to process. I know, she said softly, and then she did something that caught me completely off guard. She reached over and gently pulled the ring box from my jacket pocket. Can I see it? I watched, feeling strangely detached, as she opened the box and examined the ring I'd spent months choosing for another woman. It's beautiful, she said finally. Classic, elegant, timeless, very you. She closed the box and set it on the coffee table. But you know what? What? Brittany would have found something wrong with it within 6 months. The setting would be too high or too low, or she'd want a different band, or she'd see someone else's ring and decide she needed an upgrade. Call's voice was matter of fact, not cruel. She's never been satisfied with what she has. She always wants what someone else has. Like Andrew instead of me. Like Andrew's flashiness instead of your substance. Like his grand gestures instead of your daily kindnesses. Like his promises of a bigger life instead of appreciating the beautiful life she already had with you. Something broke open in my chest at those words, and before I could stop myself, I was crying. Not the dignified, silent tears of a man trying to maintain his composure, but the ugly, body-shaking sobs of someone whose entire world had just collapsed. Nicole didn't say anything. She simply moved closer and pulled me against her, letting me fall apart in her arms while she stroked my hair and whispered that it was okay, that I was safe, that I wasn't alone. When the tears finally subsided, I found myself looking up into her blue eyes, my head still resting against her shoulder. I'm sorry, I whispered. I don't usually fall apart like that. You just had your heart ripped out in front of 50 people, Nicole replied, her fingers still tangled in my hair. You're allowed to fall apart. And then, without overthinking it, without considering the implications or the timing or anything else, I kissed her. It was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as she kissed me back with a passion that told me everything I needed to know about how long she'd been waiting for this moment. When we finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine. Are you sure about this? She whispered. I don't want to be your rebound, Desmond. I want to be your next chapter. So do I replied, surprising myself with how certain I sounded. So do I. I woke up the next morning in the most comfortable bed I'd ever experienced, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. For a blissful moment, I forgot where I was and why I was there. Then the events of the previous evening came flooding back, along with the realization that I wasn't alone. Nicole was sitting in an elegant armchair by the floor-to-ceiling windows, already dressed in a silk robe and reading something on her tablet. Sunlight streamed through the glass, creating a halo effect around her platinum hair that made her look almost ethereal. Good morning, she said softly, looking up from her screen.
Ow.
How are you feeling? I took inventory of my emotional state and was surprised to find that while I still felt raw from Andrew and Brittany's betrayal, there was something else there too, a sense of possibility I hadn't expected. Better than I should, considering, I admitted, sitting up and running a hand through my disheveled hair. What time is it? Almost noon? I figured you needed the sleep. Nicole set down her tablet and moved to sit on the edge of the bed. I've been dealing with some damage control. This morning, damage control. Damage control. Your phone has been buzzing nonstop since about 8 a.m., apparently. Last night's drama has made its way through your entire social circle. She handed me my phone, and I saw dozens of missed calls and text messages. Before you look at those, There's something I need to tell you." The serious tone in her voice made my stomach clench. "What is it?" "Andrew called me directly about an hour ago. Apparently he's been trying to reach you and couldn't. He wanted me to talk sense into you about not doing anything rash that might affect the business." I stared at her, incredulous. "He's worried about the business?" "After what he did last night, it gets worse," Nicole continued, her jaw tightening. "He also wanted me to convince you that what happened was inevitable, and that you should be mature enough to accept that sometimes these things just happen between people." The audacity was breathtaking. "And what did you tell him?" Nicole's smile was sharp as a blade. "I told him that if he ever contacted me again, I'd make sure every business leader in Millbrook knew exactly what kind of man he really is." Then I hung up and made some calls of my own. "What kind of calls?" "It's the kind that come with having a family name that opens doors in this city," Nicole said, standing up and walking to her walk-in closet. "Get dressed. There. There's some people I want you to meet." An hour later, I found myself in the back of Nicole's Mercedes again. This time, wearing a suit she'd had delivered from her family's personal tailor, apparently. They kept measurements for all their close friends. The fit was perfect, better than anything I'd ever owned. "Where are we going?" I asked as we drove through the financial district of downtown Millbrook. "Sterling & Associates," Nicole replied. "They're the premier corporate law firm in the city. My family has used them for 3 generations." "Nicole, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't afford your not paying," she interrupted. "Richard Sterling is my godfather. He's been wanting to meet you anyway." "Meet me? Why?" She turned to face me, and there was something in her expression I couldn't quite read. "Because I may have mentioned you once or twice over the past 2 years. He's been curious about the man who captured my attention so completely." We pulled up in front of a gleaming 40-story tower. Nicole led me through a marble lobby that screamed old money and established power. The elevator took us to the top floor, where we were immediately ushered into a corner office with panoramic views of the city. Richard Sterling was exactly what I'd expected. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the kind of commanding presence that comes from decades of wielding influence. What I hadn't expected was the warmth in his eyes when he looked at Nicole. "Nikki, darling," he said, embracing her like the father figure he clearly was. "You look radiant despite the circumstances." "Uncle Richard, I'd like you to meet Desmond." "Right," Nicole said. And I noticed she called him uncle, despite having introduced him as her godfather, Richard. Sterling extended his hand with a firm grip and an assessing look. The man who's been making my goddaughter smile for 2 years, even when she thought no one was looking. I glanced at Nicole, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. She's been talking about me for 2 years. Every family dinner, every holiday gathering, every time I asked about her personal life, Richard confirmed with an amused smile. "I was beginning to think you were a figment of her imagination," Nicole warned, but he waved. "Her off, please. Sit." Richard gestured to the leather chairs facing his massive desk. "Nicole has filled me in on last night's unfortunate events. I want you to know that I've already had my team pull all the contracts and agreements related to Wright and Jackson Consulting." "I'm sorry, what?" I looked between Nicole and Richard, confused. "Your business partnership with Andrew Jackson," Richard continued. "Nicole asked me to review the legal structure to understand your options moving forward. I didn't ask you to. I started, but Nicole placed her hand over mine." "Yes, you did," she said firmly. "Maybe not in so many words, but when you told me you couldn't face going back to work with Andrew, you were asking for help. I'm just providing it." Richard pulled out a thick folder. "The good news is that your partnership agreement includes a morality clause that you insisted on 3 years ago. Apparently, you were more prescient than you knew." "A morality clause?" "Any behavior that brings disrepute to the company or its partners can be grounds for dissolution of the partnership," Richard explained. "Stealing your partner's fiancé at a public event and humiliating him in front of 50 witnesses definitely qualifies." I felt a spark of something I hadn't experienced since last night, hope. "What does that mean, practically?" "It means you can dissolve the partnership, force the sale of company assets, and walk away with your full 50%, Richard said. "Or, if you prefer, you can buy out Andrew's share at current market value and keep the business for yourself. But the company is worth ... approximately $12 million, Nicole said quietly. "I had it appraised this morning." I stared at her, overwhelmed by the efficiency with which she'd mobilized resources I didn't even know existed. "You had my company appraised in one morning." "I know people," she said simply. "The question is, what do you want to do?" Before I could answer, Richard's assistant knocked and entered. "Mr. Sterling, Andrew Jackson is here. He says it's urgent and that he needs to speak with Mr. Wright immediately." Richard looked at me with raised eyebrows. Interesting timing. "Shall we see what Mr. Jackson has to say for himself?" I looked at Nicole, who squeezed my hand encouragingly. "It's your choice, Desmond. But remember, you're not the same man who left that restaurant last night. You have options now. You have people in your corner." For the first time in 12 hours, I felt powerful instead of powerless. "Send him in," I said. "Let's hear what he has to say." Andrew Jackson walked into Richard Sterling's office looking like a man who hadn't slept. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and there was a desperate edge to his movements that I'd never seen before. When his eyes landed on me, sitting confidently beside Nicole with one of the city's most powerful attorneys flanking my other side, his face went pale. "Day, thank God," Andrew said, his voice carrying a forced casualness that fooled no one. "I've been trying to reach you all morning. We need to talk about damage control for the company." "Damage control?" I remained seated, letting him stand. Awkwardly in the middle of the room. "What kind of damage would that be, Andrew? Look, I know last night was complicated," Andrew began, glancing nervously at Nicole and Richard. "But we can't let personal issues affect our business. Wright and Jackson has too much at stake." Richard Sterling cleared his throat. "Mr. Jackson, I'm Richard Sterling, Mr. Wright's attorney. Perhaps you'd like to have legal representation present for this conversation." Andrew's eyes widened slightly. "Legal representation? Day, what's going on here? Why do you need lawyers? Maybe because my business partner just publicly humiliated me and stole my girlfriend?" I replied calmly. "Because I'm starting to wonder what else you've been doing behind my back." What's that supposed to mean? Andrew's defensive tone was immediate and telling. Nicole leaned forward slightly. "It means we've been doing some digging into Wright and Jackson's recent business dealings, and we found some interesting discrepancies." The color drained completely from Andrew's face. "You've been investigating our company, Day. You can't be serious. We're partners. We're brothers." "Brothers don't steal each other's fiancés," I said quietly. "They certainly don't do it. At elaborate proposal parties, they helped plan." Richard opened a thick file on his desk. "You're familiar with the Henderson Industries contract that your firm secured last month?" Andrew's jaw tightened. "Of course. It was a major win for us. A $5 million consulting deal." "Indeed," Richard continued smoothly. "What's interesting is that Henderson Industries has no record of ever requesting consulting services. In fact, they were quite surprised when my investigators contacted them this morning." I watched Andrew's face carefully, and what I saw there confirmed my growing suspicions. This wasn't just about Brittany. This was about something much bigger. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing," Andrew said, his voice rising, "but Henderson Industries is a legitimate client with legitimate needs." Led by a CEO who happens to be Brittany's second cousin, Nicole added casually, consulting her own notes. "A CEO who, according to our research, has been struggling with some significant gambling debts." The silence in the room was deafening. Andrew stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, looking like a man watching his entire world collapse and reel. "Time. Sit down, Andrew," I said finally, my voice carrying an authority I'd never used with him before. "It's time you told me the truth." Andrew sank into the chair across from us, and I could see him trying to calculate his way out of this situation. "Day, whatever you think you know, I think I know that you've been using our company to launder money," I interrupted. "I think I know that Brittany has been helping you by providing fake contracts through her family connections. I know that last night wasn't just about stealing my girlfriend, it was about making sure I was too devastated to look too closely at our books. Richard Sterling nodded approvingly. "Very good, Mr. Wright. You're thinking like a prosecutor." "You have no proof of any of this," Andrew said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, we do," Nicole replied, pulling out her tablet. "Amazing. What a private investigator can uncover in 8 hours when properly motivated. Shall I read some of the more interesting findings?" Andrew's hands were visibly shaking now. "Nicole, please." You don't understand the situation. There are people involved in this who don't accept failure very well. Are you threatening us, Mr. Jackson? Richard's voice had gone ice cold. No, I'm trying to warn you. Day, you have no idea what you're getting into. These aren't just business irregularities. There are serious people who expect certain returns on their investments. The pieces were starting to come together in a way that made my blood run cold. You borrowed money from dangerous people. I had debts, Andrew said desperately. Gambling debts, investment losses, lifestyle expenses. When you suggested we expand the business last year, I saw an opportunity to solve my problems. By making me an unwitting partner in money laundering. By creating a legitimate business front that could clean some cash and pay back some very patient but increasingly impatient creditors. Andrew leaned forward, his desperation now completely visible. Day, you have to understand. If we dissolve the partnership now, if the business falls apart, these people will come after both of us. Nicole and Richard exchanged a look that told me they'd anticipated this revelation. How much do you owe? I asked quietly, including interest. Almost $3 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. Our entire business, everything we'd built together, had been turned into a criminal enterprise to cover Andrew's gambling addiction and Brittany. She doesn't know about the dangerous people, Andrew said quickly. She just thought we were inflating some contracts to maximize profits. I told her it was creative accounting, not ... this. Oh, she knew you. Were stealing from me. Andrew nodded miserably. The plan was to gradually buy out your share of the business over time, using the inflated contract money. By the time you realized what was happening, you'd be a wealthy man with a generous severance package. You'd have both my business and my girlfriend. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Andrew said, his voice breaking. Last night was Brittany's idea. She said she couldn't wait anymore, that she wanted to be with me openly. I tried to convince her to wait, but she threatened to tell you everything if I didn't propose. Richard Sterling closed his file with a sharp snap. Mr. Jackson, you're confessing to multiple felonies in front of witnesses. I'm trying to save my partner's life, Andrew shot back. These people I owe money to, they don't care about legal technicalities. If the business fails, if the money stops flowing, they'll assume Day was part of the deception all along. The first time since entering this office, I felt a chill of real fear. Who are these people, Andrew? The kind who collect debts with baseball bats and car accidents, Andrew said quietly. The kind who won't believe that Desmond Wright, successful businessman, had no idea his partner was using their company to wash dirty money. Nicole reached over and took my hand, squeezing it firmly. Don't worry, she said with quiet confidence. There are ways to handle this kind of problem when you have the right resources. Richard Sterling was already reaching for his phone. I'm calling Detective Morrison at the Financial Crimes Unit and my security consultant. If these people are as dangerous as Mr. Jackson claims, we need to move quickly. What are you doing? Andrew asked in panic. We're going to clean up your mess, I said, standing up and straightening my jacket. But Andrew, you're going to help us do it. When it's over, you're going to disappear from my life forever. And if I refuse, Nicole smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then you'll discover that there are people even more dangerous than your gambling creditors. People who protect what's theirs. Detective Morrison arrived at Richard Sterling's office within an hour, accompanied by 2 federal agents and a briefcase full of evidence that made my head spin. What I'd assumed was a simple case of Andrew's gambling debts turned out to be something far more sinister and far-reaching. Mr. Wright, Detective Morrison began, spreading photographs and documents across Richard's conference table. Your business partner has been under federal surveillance for the past 4 months as part of Operation Clean Slate, a multi-state investigation into organized money laundering. I stared at the surveillance photos of Andrew meeting with men I didn't recognize, entering buildings I'd never seen, conducting business I'd known nothing about, for months. But our company financials have been clean. I review everything.
Up.
Everything, Agent Sarah Chen corrected, opening a laptop and showing me bank records I'd never seen before. Andrew Jackson opened 3 separate business accounts using Wright and Jackson's tax identification number, accounts you weren't listed on, accounts that have processed over $12 million in the past 18 months. Like a physical blow. $12 million. The Henderson Industries contract was just the tip of the iceberg, Agent Chen continued. Jackson has been creating fake contracts with over 30 shell companies, all connected to the Torino crime family. Out of Chicago? Torino? Nico looked up from her own set of documents, her face grim. Uncle Richard, isn't that the family that tried to muscle into our construction projects 5 years ago? Richard Sterling nodded gravely. The same family? They've been expanding their operations eastward, looking for legitimate businesses too. Clean their drug and gambling proceeds. Andrew, who had been sitting silently through these revelations, finally spoke up. You don't understand. They approached me, not the other way around. When my gambling debts got out of control, they offered me a solution. I thought it would just be a few transactions, enough to get me back on my feet. When did this start? I demanded, though I was afraid of the answer. About 6 months after you and Brittany got serious, Andrew admitted not meeting my eyes. Right around the time you started talking about proposing, the timeline hit me like a sledgehammer. You've been planning this for over 2 years. Not planning, Andrew said desperately. Surviving. Day, you have to understand the Torinos. Don't take no for an answer. Once they had their hooks in me, I couldn't get out. Agent Chen pulled out another file. The engagement to Brittany Johnson wasn't just personal, Mr. Wright. Her family's connections to several large corporations made her extremely valuable to the money laundering operation. The Torino specifically requested that Jackson strengthen that relationship. I felt Nicole's hand squeeze mine as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. They told you to steal her from me. They told me to secure the asset, Andrew said miserably, Brittany's cousin at Henderson Industries. Her uncle's construction company, her father's import business, they're all being used as fronts now. The Torinos needed someone with legitimate access to those connections. So everything, I said slowly, our entire relationship, the 3 years we spent together, all of it was just, what? A business strategy? Detective Morrison leaned forward. Mr. Wright, there's something else you need to know. The Torinos didn't just target your business randomly. They've been systematically identifying successful partnerships in multiple cities, then corrupting one partner to gain access to legitimate business infrastructure. How many other companies? Nicole asked. 17 that we know of, Agent, Chen replied. Detroit, Cleveland, and now Millbrook. The pattern is always the same. Identify a successful partnership, compromise one partner through gambling debts or other leverage. Then use the business to launder increasingly large amounts of money. Richard Sterling had been taking notes throughout the briefing. What's their endgame? They can't keep this up indefinitely. They don't plan to, Detective Morrison said grimly. Intelligence suggests they're planning to liquidate all the compromised businesses within the next 60 days, transferring the cleaned money offshore and disappearing. The corrupted partners are typically eliminated to prevent them from becoming liabilities. The word eliminated hung in the air like a death sentence. Asterisk, they're going to kill Andrew? Asked, though I wasn't sure I cared about the answer. They're going to kill both of you, Agent Chen said bluntly. As far as they're concerned, you're both liabilities now. Andrew because he's served his purpose, and you because you know too much. Nicole stood up abruptly, her face pale but determined. How long do we have? Based on our intelligence, they're accelerating the timeline because of last night's public spectacle, Detective Morrison explained. The engagement hijacking drew too much attention to Wright and Jackson. They need to clean up loose ends quickly. How quickly? Richard asked. We believe they're planning to move within 48 hours. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. In less than 2 days, professional killers would be coming for me because of crimes I'd never committed. Because of a business I'd built honestly that had been corrupted without my knowledge. There is some good news, Agent Chen said, though. Her tones suggested otherwise. We've been planning to take down the entire operation, and Mr. Wright's situation has given us the perfect opportunity. You want to use him as bait, Nicole said, her voice sharp with anger. We want to use him as the key to dismantling a criminal organization that's stolen hundreds of millions of dollars and destroyed dozens of legitimate businesses. Detective, Morrison corrected. But yes, there would be some risk involved. Absolutely not, Nicole said immediately. There has to be another way. Actually, I said quietly, surprising everyone, including myself, I want to hear the plan.
Desmond, no!
Nicole turned to face me, as people kill for a living. You're not equipped for this kind of danger. Maybe not, I agreed, but I'm equipped to be angry. Andrew and these criminals have stolen 2 years of my life, corrupted my business, endangered my future, and manipulated my relationships. I'm not running away and hiding while they destroy other people's lives too. Richard Sterling smiled approvingly, spoken like a true fighter. What do you need from us, detective? We need Mr. Wright to appear to go about his normal business routine while wearing a wire. The Torinos will likely approach him directly to gauge what he knows and determine if he needs to be silenced. When they do, we'll be ready. And if something goes wrong? Nicole asked. That's where your family's resources come in handy, Agent Chen said with a slight smile. We understand the Sterling family has connections to some very competent private security firms. Nicole looked at her godfather, who nodded once. The best money can buy. If Mr. Wright is willing to do this, he'll have more protection than most. Heads of state, what about Brittany? I asked, though I wasn't sure why I still cared. Ms. Johnson is currently in federal protective custody, Detective Morrison replied. She's agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. Apparently, when she learned about the Torino connection this morning, she realized she was in over her head. Andrew looked up sharply. Brittany's talking to the FBI. She's already talked to the FBI, Agent Chen corrected. Extensively. The fake contracts, about your gambling debts, about everything she knows regarding the money laundering operation. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something like justice beginning to take shape. Andrew had lost his criminal partners, his cooperating girlfriend, and his freedom. The Torinos were about to lose their money laundering network, and I was about to get my life back. When do we start? I asked. The wire felt strange against my chest as I walked into the Wright and Jackson offices the next morning, trying to maintain the appearance of normalcy while knowing that federal agents were monitoring my every word from a van parked across the street. Nicole had wanted to station her private security team inside the building, but Detective Morrison insisted that too much visible protection would spook the Torinos before they revealed their plans. Just act like you're trying to understand what Andrew's been doing. Agent Chen had instructed me during the pre-dawn briefing. They'll approach you to gauge whether you're a threat or whether you can be brought into the fold. Either way, we'll have them. The office felt different knowing what I now knew about the shadow business Andrew had been running parallel to our legitimate consulting work. Every meeting room could have hosted criminal planning sessions. Every filing cabinet might contain evidence of money laundering. Every phone call could have been coordinating with killers. I'd been at my desk for less than an hour when my assistant Jennifer buzzed me on the intercom. Mr. Wright, there are 3 men here to see you. They don't have an appointment, but they say it's about Mr. Jackson, and it's urgent. My blood went cold. Through my office window, I could see 3 men in expensive suits standing in our reception area. They looked like businessmen, but there was something in their posture that screamed danger. The way they positioned themselves to watch all exits. The way their jackets fell slightly askew over what were obviously concealed weapons. Send them in, I said, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. The men entered my office with the confident stride of people accustomed to getting what they wanted. The leader was a tall, silver-haired man in his 50s with cold eyes and hands that looked like they'd done violence. His companions flanked him like bookends, one short and thick, the other tall and lean, both carrying themselves like soldiers. Mr. Right, the leader said, settling into the chair across from my desk without invitation. I'm Vincent Torino. I believe we have some mutual business concerns to discuss. Hearing the name spoken aloud made everything real in a way that surveillance photos and federal briefings hadn't. This was the man whose organization had corrupted my business, destroyed my relationship, and was now planning to kill me. Not sure what you mean, I said carefully, remembering Agent Chen's instructions to play dumb initially. Your partner Andrew Jackson has been irregular in his recent communications with my organization, Torino continued, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that suggested he wasn't used to being questioned. We're concerned that recent personal complications might affect our business relationship. Personal complications? The unfortunate situation with your engagement party. The shorter man spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a slight Chicago accent. Very public, very messy. It's the kind of thing that draws unwanted attention. I'm still not following. You, I said, though every instinct was screaming at me to run. Torino smiled. It was like watching a shark bare its teeth. Mr. Wright, let's not insult each other's intelligence. Andrew Jackson has been facilitating financial transactions for my organization through your company for over 18 months. Those transactions have been quite profitable for everyone involved. I don't know anything about you signed authorization forms for 3 of the Henderson Industries payments. The tall man interrupted, pulling out a folder and placing documents on my desk. Your signature, your authorization codes, your fingerprints on the paperwork. My heart sank as I recognized my own handwriting on what I thought were legitimate contract authorizations. Andrew had been forging my involvement while keeping me ignorant of the true nature of the deals. The question, Torino continued, is whether you're going to continue to be a cooperative partner, or whether you're going to become a problem that needs to be solved. The threat was clear, even wrapped in business language. I touched the wire under my shirt, hoping the FBI was getting every word. What exactly are you asking me to do? I said. Nothing complicated, Torino replied. Continue operating your business as normal. Continue processing the contracts Andrew has been handling. Maintain the relationships he's cultivated. In return, you'll receive a very generous consulting fee and the continued good health of everyone you care about. The mention of people I cared about sent ice through my veins. Are you threatening my family? I'm offering you a partnership, Torino corrected. But partnerships require trust, and trust requires insurance. The short man pulled out a tablet and showed me surveillance photos that made my blood freeze. Nicole leaving her mansion that morning. Nicole's godfather, Richard Sterling, entering. His law firm. Even my elderly parents at their retirement community in Florida, people hadn't spoken to in months, but who these monsters had somehow identified and located. Very thorough insurance, Torino said, noting my expression. The kind that ensures our business relationship remains stable. You son of a bitch, I said, abandoning any pretense of ignorance. Now we're being honest. Torino smiled. Like that, it makes negotiations so much simpler. That's when the first shots were fired. The sound of gunfire erupted from the outer office, followed by shouting and the crash of overturning furniture. Torino's men immediately drew weapons, positioning themselves between their boss and the office door. Federal agents, a voice shouted from the hallway. The building is surrounded. Damn it, Torino snarled, pulling out his own gun. Jackson said you were clean. Jackson lied about a lot of things, I said, diving behind my desk as the shooting intensified. The office door burst open, but instead of FBI agents, 3 men in black tactical gear stormed in. For a terrifying moment, I thought Torino had backup arriving, till I saw the insignia on their equipment. Sterling Security, Nicole's private protection team. The firefight that followed lasted less than 30 seconds, but felt like an eternity. When the smoke cleared, 2 of Torino's men were down. The third was on his knees, with his hands behind his head. And Vincent Torino himself was bleeding from a shoulder wound, while Sterling Security held him at gunpoint. Building secure, one of the security operatives spoke into his radio. Package is safe. 3 suspects in custody, 2 wounded. FBI agents flooded into the office moments later, with Detective Morrison leading the charge. Mr. Wright, are you hurt? I stood up from behind my desk on shaking legs. I'm fine, but they have surveillance on Nicole, on Richard Sterling, even on my parents. Already handled, Agent Chen said, appearing in the doorway. We had protection details on everyone before you even walked into this building, your girlfriend's security. Team just wanted to make sure they got here first. My girlfriend's security team, Nicole White, insisted on providing backup for our backup, Detective Morrison explained with a slight smile. Apparently the Sterling family doesn't like to leave things to chance. Vincent Torino was being helped to his feet by FBI agents, his face twisted with rage and pain. This isn't over, right? There are others who know about your involvement, others who won't be so easy to catch. Actually, Agent Chen said, checking her phone. Your entire organization was rolled up about 10 minutes ago. Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, simultaneous raids based on the evidence we gathered from your money laundering network. It's very much over. As they led Torino away in handcuffs, he turned back to look at me one last time. You have no idea what you've cost me. About $12 million and the rest of your life in federal prison, I replied. Seems like a fair trade for what you cost me. The media circus that followed the arrest of Vincent Torino and the dismantling of his money laundering network was unlike anything Millbrook had ever seen. By the time I walked out of the Wright and Jackson building that afternoon, news vans lined the street and reporters were shouting questions about organized crime, federal investigations, and the heroic businessman who helped bring down a multi-state criminal empire. Mr. Wright, can you tell us how long you've been working with the FBI? Is it true that your business partner was stealing millions of dollars? What's your response to claims that you were an unwitting victim of organized crime? Nicole appeared, at my side like a guardian angel, her own security team creating a protective corridor through the crowd of journalists. No comment, she said firmly, guiding me toward her waiting Mercedes. Mr. Wright will be making a statement through his attorney at the appropriate time. As we drove away from the chaos, I finally allowed myself to breathe. Is it really over? Dangerous part is, Nicole replied, squeezing my hand. Now comes the satisfying part. She was right. Over the next 72 hours, I watched with a mixture of amazement and vindication as the full scope of justice unfolded. Andrew Jackson was arrested at his apartment Tuesday morning, where federal agents found nearly $500,000 in cash hidden in his bedroom walls, along with detailed records of his gambling debts and correspondence with Torino's organization. The man who had been my best friend, my business partner, my brother in everything but blood, was charged with racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy, and wire fraud. His bail was set at $2 million. She couldn't afford since all his assets had been frozen pending investigation. 25 years to life, Richard Sterling informed me during our meeting Wednesday afternoon. That's what the federal prosecutor is expecting if he goes to trial, though they've offered him a plea deal, 15 years in exchange for full cooperation and testimony against the remaining Torino associates. Will he take it? His public defender is advising him to, Richard said with satisfaction. Apparently sitting in federal detention has given Mr. Jackson a new perspective on the consequences of his choices. The business side of the resolution was even more satisfying. With Andrew's criminal activities exposed and his partnership rights forfeited under the morality clause, Wright and Jackson Consulting reverted entirely to my control. But the company that had been corrupted by criminal money needed a complete overhaul. We're going to start fresh. I told Nicole as we reviewed the paperwork that would dissolve Wright and Jackson and establish Wright Consulting as a completely new entity. New name, new accounts, new contracts with clients who actually exist, and new premises, Nicole added with a smile. I may have found you some office space that better reflects your new status in the business community. The space she showed me was in the Sterling Business Center, a gleaming 40-story tower in the heart of Millbrook's financial district. The corner office on the 35th floor offered panoramic views of the city and came with amenities I'd never dreamed of affording. Nicole, this must cost a fortune in rent. Actually, she said, pulling out a lease agreement, it's surprisingly affordable when the building owner is your future mother-in-law. I stared at her. Future mother-in-law? Well, technically my mother owns the building. But she's been asking when she gets to meet the man who's made her daughter happier than she's been in years. Nicole's cheeks flushed slightly. I may have been presumptuous about the future part. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Detective Morrison's name appeared on the screen.
Got him?
Morrison said without preamble when I answered. Vincent Torino just pled guilty to all charges in exchange for life without parole instead of the death penalty. He's also provided information that's led to the arrest of 17 more associates across 4 states, and the others. The guys who were in my office, all looking at significant prison time. The shooter who wounded our agent got 30 years. The surveillance specialist who photographed your family got 25. Nobody's walking away from this, Mr. Wright. The vindication was sweet, but it was nothing compared to what happened with Brittany. She called me Thursday evening, supposedly from federal protective custody, though Agent Chen later told me the call was monitored and recorded as part of her cooperation agreement. Desmond. Brittany's voice was small and shaky. Nothing like the confident woman who had stolen my proposal moment just 5 days earlier. I need you to know how sorry I am. Sorry for cheating on me, or sorry for helping launder money for killers. All of it. I never meant for any of this to happen. Which part didn't you mean to happen, Brittany? The part where you carried on an affair with my best friend for months? The part where you helped create fake contracts to steal money? Or the part where you agreed to marry him at my own proposal party? The silence stretched for nearly a minute. I was selfish, she finally said. Andrew promised me things: a bigger life, more excitement, more luxury. He made what we had seem small and boring in comparison. What we had was real. I know that now, she said, and I could hear her crying. Sitting in protective custody, knowing that people wanted to kill me because of my greed, I realized that what we had was everything I should have wanted. You loved me completely, honestly. You would have given me anything. But it wasn't enough. It was everything. I was just too stupid and selfish to see it. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Brittany detailing her cooperation with federal investigators and her agreement to testify against Andrew and the Torino organization. She would serve 2 years in federal prison for her role in the money laundering scheme, followed by 3 years of probation. Her family's businesses were under federal investigation, and her cousin at Henderson Industries had already been arrested for his role in creating fraudulent contracts. I know I don't deserve to ask, Brittany said near the end of the call, but is there any chance? In the future, after I've served my time and made amends? No, I said quietly but firmly. There isn't, because of Nicole, because of who you chose to be when it mattered most. Nicole is just the woman who showed me what loyalty actually looks like. When I hung up the phone, Nicole was watching me with an expression of quiet pride. How do you feel? She asked. Like the last chapter of my old life just ended, I replied. Ready to start writing the new one? The public vindication came in waves throughout the following week. The Millbrook Business Journal ran a front-page story titled "Local Hero: How Desmond Wright Helped FBI Dismantle Criminal Empire." The article detailed my cooperation with federal agents and praised my courage in facing down organized crime to protect the integrity of Millbrook's business community. More personally satisfying was the flood of calls and messages from colleagues, clients, and acquaintances who had witnessed my humiliation at the Platinum Rose and now understood the full context of what had really been happening. Former clients, who had distanced themselves after the proposal incident, were calling to schedule meetings. Business leaders who had never given me the time of day were extending invitations to join exclusive organizations. You've become something of a celebrity, Richard Sterling observed during our Friday meeting, the man who stood up to the mob and won. It's good for business. It's good for justice, I corrected. The business is just a bonus. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came when I received a letter from Andrew, forwarded through his attorney. It was handwritten, 3 pages of apology and explanation that boiled down to a simple admission. He had been jealous of my happiness, my integrity, and my relationship with Brittany from the very beginning. The criminal activity had started as a way to solve his gambling problems, but it had become a way to destroy the life he envied. I know I can never make this right, the letter concluded. I know I've lost your friendship, your respect, and any chance of redemption. But I want you to know that watching you handle this situation with such courage and grace has reminded me of the man I used to want to be. I hope prison gives me the chance to become that man again. I read the letter twice, then filed it away in my desk drawer. Forgiveness might come someday, but justice had been served. 6 months later, I stood in the mirror of the presidential suite at the Grand Millbrook Hotel, adjusting my custom-tailored tuxedo and marveling at how completely my life had changed. The man looking back at me bore little resemblance to the broken, humiliated figure who had watched his world collapse at the Platinum Rose. This man had confidence in his eyes, his purpose in his posture, and a future that blazed with possibility. You clean up pretty well for a guy who used to get his suits off the rack. Nicole's voice came from behind me, and I turned to see her in the doorway wearing a silk robe and a smile that still made my heart skip. You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony, I protested. though I made no move to look away from her. "Technically, the ceremony isn't for another 4 hours," she replied, moving into the room and straightening my already perfect bow tie. "Besides, I wanted to give you something before the chaos begins." She handed me a small velvet box, and, for a moment, my mind flashed back to that other ring, the one that had sat uselessly in my pocket while my former life imploded. But this box contained something entirely different. Vintage cufflinks that gleamed with understated elegance. "They belonged to my grandfather," Nicole explained as I examined them. "He wore them on his wedding day, and my father wore them. His uncle Richard suggested it was time to continue the tradition." I looked up from the cufflinks to meet her eyes. "Are you sure your family wants a guy with my complicated history becoming part of their legacy?" Nicole laughed, the sound bright and genuinely amused. "Desmond, in the past 6 months, you've helped the FBI dismantle a criminal organization, built Wright Consulting into one of the most respected firms in the city, and been featured on the cover of Millbrook Business Review as Entrepreneur of the Year. My family considers you an upgrade to the bloodline." She wasn't wrong about the transformation. Wright Consulting had not only recovered from the Andrew Jackson scandal, it had thrived because of it. The publicity from the federal investigation had brought in clients who were impressed by my integrity and courage. My willingness to cooperate with law enforcement, even at personal risk, had become a selling point in a business world increasingly concerned with ethical partnerships. The new offices in Sterling Tower had become a symbol of that success. The corner suite on the 35th floor buzzed with activity from a team of 12 employees, handling consulting contracts worth more than Wright and Jackson had ever achieved. More importantly, every contract was clean, every client was legitimate, and every dollar earned was something I could be proud of. "Are you nervous?" Nicole asked, settling onto the sofa and watching me pace around the room. "About marrying you?" "Not for a second," I replied honestly. "About the wedding itself. Terrified. It wasn't an exaggeration. The guest list for our wedding included 3 federal judges, the mayor of Millbrook, 2 senators, the FBI director, and approximately 200 of the most influential people in the state. Nicole's family had connections that made my old social circle look like a neighborhood barbecue, and they'd insisted on celebrating our union with appropriate grandeur. "You know," Nicole said thoughtfully, "exactly 1 year ago today, you were preparing for a very different kind of proposal." The anniversary hadn't escaped my notice. October 15th had been seared into my memory as the date my old life ended. Now it would be remembered as the date my new life officially began. "Do you ever think about how different things would be if Brittany had said yes to you instead of Andrew?" Nicole asked. I considered the question seriously. Sometimes. But when I really think about it, I realized that relationship was built on a foundation that was already cracked. Even if Andrew hadn't interfered, even if the criminal stuff had never happened, I don't think Brittany and I would have lasted. Why not? Asterisk because she never saw me the way you do, I said, moving to sit beside her. She saw potential that she wanted to change, dreams she wanted to redirect, a life she wanted to improve. You see value that you want to protect, qualities you want to celebrate, a partnership you want to strengthen. Nicole smiled and leaned against my shoulder. Plus, I'm much better looking than Andrew Jackson. Much better looking, I agreed, kissing the top of her head, and significantly less likely to steal money from organized crime figures. A knock on the door interrupted our moment. Mr. Wright. Richard Sterling's voice called from the hallway. The photographer is ready for the pre-ceremony shots. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of activity that felt surreal in the best possible way. The Grand Millbrook Hotel had been transformed into something from a fairy tale, with white roses. Flown in from Ecuador, a detail Nicole had insisted on as a callback to my original proposal plans, crystal chandeliers, and enough candlelight to illuminate a small city. But what struck me most was the stark difference between this celebration and the disaster at the Platinum Rose. Where that event had been tainted with deception and betrayal, this one radiated authenticity and joy. Every person in attendance was genuinely happy for us, genuinely invested in our success. The ceremony itself was held in the hotel's grand ballroom, with 300 guests filling elegant chairs arranged in perfect rows. As I stood at the altar waiting for Nicole to appear, I caught sight of familiar faces in the crowd, federal agents who had become friends, business associates who had stood by me during the investigation, even Detective Morrison and Agent Chen, who had insisted they wouldn't miss the wedding of the century. But the most meaningful moment came when I spotted two faces I hadn't expected to see. My parents, who had flown in from their retirement community in Florida, sat beaming in the front row. When the Torino organization had threatened them, I realized how much distance I'd allowed to grow between us over the years. The past 6 months had been spent rebuilding that relationship, and seeing them here to witness my happiness felt like another piece of my life clicking into place. When the music began and Nicole appeared at the back of the ballroom, every other thought evaporated from my mind. She moved toward me in a gown that seemed to capture and reflect light from every candle in the room, her face radiant with joy and love and absolute certainty. This wasn't a woman settling for what was available or choosing the flashier option. This was a woman who had chosen me deliberately, completely, and forever. "Dearly beloved," the officiant began, but I barely heard the words. I was too focused on Nicole's eyes, too overwhelmed by the knowledge that this remarkable woman had not only saved me from my darkest moment, but had chosen to build a life with me. The vows we exchanged were personal, written separately but somehow perfectly complementary. Nicole spoke about loyalty, about seeing past the surface to recognize true character, about finding strength in partnership. I spoke about second chances, about learning the difference between being loved and being valued, about gratitude for the woman who had shown me what I was really worth. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the kiss we shared was witnessed by 300 guests, but it felt as intimate as if we were alone in the world. The applause that followed was thunderous, genuine, and completely different from the confused clapping that had accompanied Andrew and Brittany's announcement a year earlier. The reception that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The ballroom had been transformed again, now featuring a 12-piece orchestra, champagne fountains, and a buffet that had been catered by 3 different Michelin-starred restaurants. But more than the luxury, what impressed me was the warmth. These weren't people attending out of obligation or curiosity. They were celebrating because they genuinely cared about our happiness. Speech. The crowd began chanting as dinner wound down, and I found myself standing with a champagne glass in hand, looking out at faces that represented not just our guests, but my entire new life. A year ago, I began, my voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. I thought I knew what my future looked like. I thought I understood what love meant, what partnership meant, what loyalty meant. I was wrong about all of it. The room fell silent, everyone understanding the reference to my very public humiliation. Sometimes, I continued, the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted shows you what you actually need. Sometimes the people who betray you lead you directly to the people who will protect you. I looked down at Nicole, seated at the head table with tears in her eyes. Nicole White. Now, Nicole White didn't just save me from my worst moment. She showed me what it means to be valued for who I am rather than who someone thinks I could become. She showed me what it means to have a partner who builds you up instead of tearing you down. She showed me what real love looks like. The applause was warm and sustained, but I held up my hand to continue. But this celebration isn't just about Nicole and me. It's about justice. It's about second chances. It's about the truth always coming to light, even when it takes time. I raised my glass higher. The federal agents who protected us too. The family and friends who supported us, and to the reminder that good people always win in the end. 2 good people.
Out.
The crowd echoed. 300 glasses raised in unison. As the evening continued with dancing and laughter and joy, I received a steady stream of congratulations and well wishes. But the most meaningful conversation came when Agent Chen approached me during a quiet moment on the hotel's terrace. AGHS. Are the other cases going? I asked, referring to the ongoing prosecutions of Torino associates. Better than expected, she replied. Your cooperation opened doors we never could have opened otherwise. We've recovered over $40 million in laundered money and prevented at least 6 other businesses from being corrupted. And Andrew? He took the plea deal. 15 years with the possibility of parole and 12 if he continues cooperating. He's been providing information about other criminal organizations he encountered through the Torinos and Brittany. Chun's expression softened slightly. She started serving her sentence last month. Federal minimum security facility in Pennsylvania. Her lawyer says she's been a model prisoner, participating in education programs and financial crimes counseling. I nodded, feeling an unexpected pang of something that wasn't quite sympathy, but wasn't indifference either. I hope she figures it out. You're a better man than most would be in your situation, Agent Chen observed. I'm a man who learned the difference between justice and revenge, I replied. Justice has been served. Revenge would just make me smaller. As the evening wound down and our guests began to depart, Nicole and I found ourselves alone on the ballroom floor for one last dance. The orchestra played softly as we swayed together, surrounded by the remnants of our celebration. So Nicole said, her arms around my neck, how does it feel to be Desmond Wright, respected businessman, federal crime-fighting hero, and husband to the most amazing woman in Millbrook? Like the luckiest man alive, I replied honestly. A year ago, I thought my life was over. Tonight, I feel like it's just beginning. That's because it is, she said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss me. We have a honeymoon in Italy to look forward to, a business to run when we get back, and about 50 years of marriage to figure out together. Only 50? She said with a grin. I'll reevaluate after we see how you handle our first fight. As we left the ballroom that night, walking hand in hand through the hotel lobby, past congratulating staff and lingering guests, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the marble floor. Two people who had found each other in the wreckage of betrayal and built something as beautiful from the pieces. The man who had stood broken and humiliated in the Platinum Rose exactly 1 year earlier was gone. In his place was someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more grateful for the life he'd been given. Someone who understood that the worst moments often lead to the best chapters, and that real love isn't about grand gestures and public declarations. It's about finding someone who sees your worth when you can't see it yourself. As we stepped into the elevator that would take us to our honeymoon suite, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From betrayal to justice, from humiliation to triumph, from the end of one story to the beginning of another. Some endings, I realized, are really just the best possible beginnings in disguise. 2 years after my wedding to Nicole, I stood in the same penthouse that had once represented the pinnacle of my relationship with Brittany, but everything about it had changed. The sterile, designer-curated space had been transformed into a warm, lived-in home filled with personal touches that told the story of two people building a life together. Family photos covered the mantel. Nicole's art collection brought color. Two walls that had once been stark white. The kitchen actually looked like people cooked in it instead of just posing for magazine shoots. The car's here, Nicole called from the bedroom, her voice carrying a mix of excitement and nervous energy that I'd come to recognize over the past few months. Today was special for several reasons, but the most important was tucked safely in. The breast pocket of my suit jacket, the ultrasound photo that showed our first edition, would be arriving in 5 months. We'd been waiting for the perfect moment to share the news with our families. And tonight's event seemed ideal. Wright Consulting was celebrating its 2nd anniversary with a gala that had become one of Millbrook's most anticipated social events. What had started as a small business rebuilding from scandal had grown into a consulting firm with offices in 3 cities and a client list that included Fortune 500 companies. But more than the financial success, I was proud of what we'd built. A company known for integrity, transparency, and results. Ready to face your adoring public? Nicole asked, appearing in the living room wearing a stunning midnight blue gown that perfectly concealed her early pregnancy while making her look radiant. Ready to face our adoring public? I corrected, taking her hand. This success belongs to both of us. It was true. While I'd focused on rebuilding the business itself, Nicole had used her connections and business acumen to open doors that might have remained closed to a consultant with my complicated history. Her belief in my abilities had been unwavering, even when potential clients had initially been skeptical about partnering with someone who'd been involved. However, unwittingly, in a federal criminal investigation, the ride to the Grand Millbrook, Hotel gave us a few minutes of quiet before what promised to be a whirlwind evening. As our car pulled up to the same entrance where we'd celebrated our wedding 2 years earlier, I was struck by how different this arrival felt. Instead of nervous anticipation, I felt confident satisfaction. Instead of wondering if I deserved my good fortune, I felt grateful for the work that had earned it. Mr. and Mrs. Wright, the photographers called out as we stepped onto the red carpet that had been rolled out for the evening. Could we get a photo by the Wright Consulting banner? The banner in question was massive, featuring the company logo I designed myself and the tagline that had become our motto: integrity, innovation, results. Below it, in smaller text, was a line that always made me smile: building businesses the right way since 2023. The grand ballroom was filled with 500 guests, a mix of clients, competitors, city officials, and media representatives. But as we made our way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and making small talk, I found myself looking for specific faces. The people who had been with us through the darkest times and deserved to share in this triumph. Detective Morrison was there with his wife, both beaming with pride as they approached us. "Look at this," Morrison said, gesturing around the opulent ballroom. "From helping us catch organized criminals to hosting the business event of the year, hell of a transformation, right? Couldn't have done it without your protection and support," I replied, meaning every word. "How are things on your end? Any more criminal organizations trying to corrupt Millbrook businesses?" "Funny you should ask." Morrison's expression grew serious. "Agent Chen wanted me to tell you the Torino takedown led to 17 other investigations across the country. Your cooperation created a domino effect that's still dismantling criminal networks 2 years later." Before I could respond, I felt a tap on my shoulder and turned to see Richard Sterling approaching with a champagne flute and a satisfied smile. "Uncle Richard," Nicole greeted him with a warm hug. "Thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss it," Sterling replied, then turned to me. "Desmond, I've been meaning to tell you, the Bar Association wants to give you a Citizen Service Award for your cooperation in the federal investigation. Apparently, your willingness to wear a wire and face down armed criminals has inspired other business leaders to report suspicious activities." The recognition was flattering, but what mattered more was the continuing impact of those terrifying moments in my office 2 years earlier. The decision to help the FBI hadn't just saved my life, it had helped protect countless other innocent business owners from being victimized by similar schemes. "Speaking of recognition," Nicole said with a mysterious smile, "there's someone here who's been asking to speak with you." She led me across the ballroom to where a distinguished woman in her 60s was examining the display of Wright Consulting's charitable initiatives. When she turned around, I recognized her immediately from newspaper photos and television interviews. "Mr. Wright," she said, extending her hand, "I'm Senator Patricia Caldwell. I've been hoping to meet you for some time." Senator Caldwell was one of the most powerful politicians in the state, known for her work on corporate accountability and white-collar crime legislation. Meeting her felt surreal, like being recognized by royalty. "Senator," I managed to say, "it's an honor." "The honor is mine," she replied. "Your cooperation with federal investigators has become a case study in how private citizens can help law enforcement combat organized crime. I've been using your story in Senate hearings to encourage more robust whistleblower protections. I never thought of myself as a whistleblower. I was just trying to survive. Sometimes the most important heroes are the people who do the right thing because they have no choice," Senator Caldwell said. "Your courage under pressure has literally changed how we approach corporate crime investigation." As the evening progressed, I was struck repeatedly by the ripple effects of that terrifying day when Vincent Torino had walked into my office. Stories emerged throughout the night of other businesses that had been approached by criminal organizations, but had reported the contact to authorities, inspired by the publicity around my case. A restaurant owner in Cleveland, construction company in Detroit, a shipping business in Chicago. All of them had chosen cooperation over corruption, and all of them credited the Wright and Jackson. Investigation was showing them that there was a way to fight back. But perhaps the most meaningful moment of the evening came when I spotted a familiar face near the back of the ballroom. Agent Sarah Chen, now promoted to Assistant Director of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, was talking with several other federal agents who had worked on the Torino investigation. "Agent Chen," I said, approaching her during a lull in the festivities. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Assistant Director Chen now," she corrected with a smile. "And I wouldn't miss this. Your case was a career maker for a lot of us." "I wanted to give you an update on some of the people from your past." I braced myself. Not sure I wanted to hear about Andrew or Brittany or any of the other figures from that dark chapter of my life. "Andrew Jackson was released on supervised parole last month," Chen began. "He served 18 months of his 15-year sentence because of his extensive cooperation with multiple investigations. He's living in a halfway house in Ohio and working as a bookkeeper for a nonprofit organization that helps ex-convicts reintegrate into society." The information was more positive than I'd expected. "How is he doing?" "Better than anyone predicted. Prison seems to have been a wake-up call. He's been attending Gamblers Anonymous, earned his GED while incarcerated, and has been helping other inmates prepare for their release. His caseworker says he's one of the most genuinely reformed individuals she's worked with." I felt a complicated mix of emotions: relief that Andrew was getting his life together, residual anger over his betrayal, and something that might have been forgiveness beginning to take root. And Brittany? Her full 2-year sentence. She declined early release opportunities because she wanted to complete every available rehabilitation program. She's now working as a victim advocate for white-collar crime survivors and has spoken at several conferences about the psychological factors that lead people to make unethical financial decisions. The transformation was remarkable and completely unexpected. The Brittany I'd known had been focused on luxury and status. To hear that she was now helping other victims was almost impossible to reconcile with my memories. "She asked me to give you something if I ever saw you again," Chen continued, pulling out a sealed envelope. "She said she understood if you didn't want to read it, but she hoped you'd at least accept it." I took the envelope, noting my name written in Brittany's familiar handwriting. Did she say what it was? An apology and a thank you? Apparently, watching you handle the federal investigation with such integrity made her realize how far she'd fallen from the person she wanted to be. She credits your example with inspiring her to use her prison time productively instead of just serving her sentence. I tucked the letter into my jacket pocket next to the ultrasound photo, planning to decide later whether to read it. The past felt distant enough now that I could acknowledge Brittany's attempts at redemption without feeling threatened by them. "There's one more thing," Chen said, lowering her voice. "Vincent Torino died in federal prison 3 months ago. Natural causes, heart attack. With his death, that chapter is officially closed." The news should have brought satisfaction, but instead, I felt oddly empty.
Ow!
Torino's death meant justice in the ultimate sense, but it also meant the end of a story that had defined so much of my recent life. As if sensing my thoughts, Nicole appeared beside me, slipping her arm through mine. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," I said, meaning it completely. "Agent Chen was just updating me on some old cases." "In that case," Nicole said with a radiant smile, "I think it's time for your speech." The speech I've been preparing for weeks, trying to capture not just the success of Right Consulting, but the journey that had brought us to this moment. As I walked toward the podium at the front of the ballroom, thought about the man who had stood in this same hotel 2 years earlier, broken and humiliated, with no idea what his future might hold. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying clearly across the hushed ballroom. 2 years ago, I thought my business career was over. I thought my reputation was destroyed. I thought my life as I knew it was finished. The room was completely silent, everyone understanding the reference to the very public scandal that had preceded Right Consulting's founding. I was wrong about my career being over. Right Consulting's success speaks for itself. I was wrong about my reputation being destroyed. Your presence here tonight proves that integrity ultimately trumps scandal. But I was absolutely right about my life being finished. I paused, letting the apparent contradiction hang in the air. The life I thought I wanted, the life I thought I was building, the life based on false relationships and corrupt foundations that life needed to end. Because only when it was completely destroyed could I build something real, something lasting, something worthy of the people who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. I looked directly at Nicole, whose eyes were shining with unshed tears. Right, consulting isn't just a business. It's proof that second chances exist for people brave enough to take them. It's proof that integrity isn't just good ethics, it's good business. It's proof that the worst thing that happens to you can become the foundation for the best thing that happens to you. The applause was warm and sustained, but I held up my hand to continue. But tonight isn't just about celebrating our business. Success tonight is about announcing the next chapter of our story. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ultrasound photo, holding it up for the crowd to see. Nicole and I are expecting our first edition to arrive this summer. The ballroom erupted in cheers and applause that went on for several minutes. When it finally died down, I concluded with the words that had been in my heart since the day I'd met Nicole. To everyone who stood by us during the dark times, to everyone who believed in us when we were rebuilding, and to everyone who's here tonight to celebrate our success, thank you for proving that good people really do win in the end. As Nicole joined me on the stage and we kissed while 500 people cheered, I thought about the incredible journey that had brought us to this moment. From betrayal to triumph, from criminal investigation to business success. From the end of one story to the beginning of another. Later that evening, as we rode home through the quiet streets of Millbrook, Nicole curled up against my shoulder with her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Andrew hadn't betrayed you?" she asked quietly. "Not anymore," I replied honestly. I used to torture myself with that question, but I've realized it's the wrong question entirely. What's the right question? The right question is, what would have happened if you hadn't been brave enough to rescue a broken man from his worst moment? What would have happened if you hadn't seen potential where everyone else saw disaster? What would have happened if you hadn't shown me what real love looks like? Nicole smiled and nestled closer. I would have spent the rest of my life wondering about the amazing man I let slip away, and I would have spent the rest of my life settling for relationships that looked good on the surface, but were rotten underneath. As our car pulled into the garage of our penthouse building, I thought about the letter from Brittany still tucked in my jacket pocket. Tomorrow, I might read it, or I might not. The past no longer had the power to hurt me, but it also no longer had the power to define me. What defined me now was sitting beside me, her hand in mine, our future growing inside her. What defined me now was a business built on honesty and integrity. What defined me now was the knowledge that sometimes the worst betrayal leads to the greatest blessing. The man who had walked into the Platinum Rose 3 years earlier expecting to propose to his girlfriend was gone. In his place was someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more grateful for the life he'd built from the ashes of that disaster. As we rode the elevator up to our home, I realized that this was what victory looked like, not just winning, but becoming someone worthy of winning. Not just surviving betrayal, but using it as the foundation for something better than what you'd lost. Some stories end with justice. Some stories end with love. Some stories end with success. This story ended with all three, and the promise of even better chapters yet to come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.